So we are back on the record. Does the state have another witness, Ms. Barney?
We do, Your Honor. The state would call Dr. Schuler.
Okay. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear you will testify the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Thank you.
All right. If you kindly have a seat here. Please speak in the microphone. And thank you, Ms. Barney.
Thank you, Your Honor. And, Your Honor, before I begin my examination, I would note for the record that Dr. Schuler was not the individual who actually performed the tests that we are about to ask him about. That was Dr. Wyman, who has since retired. I have spoken with Mr. Shaughnessy, and it is my understanding that the defense is willing to waive any Crawford and or Melendez-Diaz issues as a result of Dr. Schuler's testimony.
Is that accurate, Mr. Shaughnessy?
That's accurate, Judge.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, could you please state your name and spell your name for the record?
Dr. Harold Schuler, Schueler.
And Dr. Schuler, by whom are you employed?
The Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office.
In what capacity?
I am the Chief Toxicologist.
What are your duties as the Chief Toxicologist?
Besides administrative duties, we do testing on blood and other specimens collected at autopsy for chemicals, drugs of abuse, alcohol.
And do you oversee the toxicology section of the lab?
Yes, I do.
And what are your supervisory duties related to that?
Budgetary, workload distribution, testing techniques development, method validation, things of that nature.
And how long have you been with the Cuyahoga County Regional Forensic Science Laboratory?
A little over 6 months.
And what did you do prior to that? Can you tell us a little bit about your training and background?
I have a Bachelor of Arts degree in chemistry from Kenyon College, which I received back in 1983. I have a master's in biochemistry from the University of Cincinnati that I obtained in 1984, a PhD from University of Cincinnati in biochemistry back in 1989. I worked as a toxicologist for 2 years with the Hamilton County Coroner's Office.
That's in Cincinnati, Ohio?
Yes.
All right, go on.
Then I was promoted to Chief of Toxicology there, and I worked 7 years until 1997 as the Chief of Toxicology. I accepted the Chief of Toxicology, or the Chief Toxicologist position at the Broward County Medical Examiner's Office in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I worked there for 15 years. Then I left Broward County and went to California and was lab director at Biotox Laboratories in Riverside, California.
And how long were you in California?
For 9 months.
And then you came to Cleveland?
Then I came to Cleveland, yes.
Very good. And, sir, do you have experience conducting tests on blood for drugs or a variety of other chemicals?
Yes, I do.
And are you able to interpret results of tests that other people conduct?
Yes, I can.
And why is that?
Having done testing for 24 years and looking at the results and reading the literature and workshops and training associated with the interpretation of the results.
And do you also engage in continuing education or keep up on the current advances in the field of toxicology?
Yes, I do.
And can you tell us a little about that, please?
Annually, I attend the Society of Forensic Toxicologists annual meeting with the workshops. I also attend multiple workshops that are local or put on by various agencies.
Very good. So you were not employed by the Cuyahoga County Regional Forensic Science Laboratory in December of 2012 when the events surrounding this case occurred, correct?
Correct.
However, were toxicology tests run on Timothy Russell and Malissa Williams?
Yes, they were.
And who ran those tests? Do you know off the top of your head?
No, I do not.
All right. You're aware that tests were run? Would a report have been generated?
Yes.
And is that the common practice for the lab?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, may I?
Sure.
Doctor, I'm handing you what's been marked for identification purposes as States Exhibits 146 and 147. Could you look at those and tell us if you recognize those?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and I'm going to let you hold on to them. And, sir, what do you recognize those as?
The final toxicology report that was issued upon completion of all the testing for Timothy Russell and Malissa Williams.
And just to be clear, which name goes with which exhibit number?
Okay. Timothy Russell goes with States Exhibit 146, and Malissa Williams goes with States Exhibit 147.
And, sir, from those reports, are you able to determine who conducted the testing on these samples?
The actual analyses were probably conducted by analysts, but the final supervisory review or author of the report is Dr. John Wyman.
And who is Dr. John Wyman?
He was the former chief toxicologist at the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office.
Your predecessor in your current position, correct?
Yes.
All right. And have you had an opportunity to review these reports prior to your testimony today?
Yes, I have.
And are you able, based on the reports, to opine about the results in the reports, even though you were not the one who individually conducted the tests?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, turning your attention to States Exhibit 100, and we'll start with Exhibit 146. Is States Exhibit 146, as it appears in your hand, consistent with it as it appears on the screen here?
Yes, it is.
All right. So, just in general, can you tell us what we're looking at here, kind of guide us through what the report is showing?
The top several lines are the case number, agency, the dates when the autopsy was, or actually receipt of the specimens into the laboratory, and the date that the report was issued.
And does it indicate the? Let me zoom in here. Does it indicate the pathologist at the top here?
Yes, it does.
And that would be Dr. Andrea Williams?
That is correct.
And when a sample of blood is received into the lab for testing, what is the procedure?
The samples are collected at autopsy, and they are put on a dumbwaiter and then lowered or taken down to a floor below into the laboratory into an accessioning area. And we have a laboratory technician who accessions the samples. He will receive the samples, log them in, identify them, label them so that we have appropriate labels, and then assign tests to those samples.
And speaking specifically of the tests done on Timothy Russell's, well, first of all, what samples were received from Timothy Russell?
We received, and that's also in the second section of the report, specimens received, cavity blood.
And what is cavity blood?
That is a general term. The pathologist would probably be better to answer that, but we assume it's just a sample that it was collected from the central cavity. So we don't know exactly where it is. It's mostly probably in the heart, lung region, but there's no indication. It's in the central compartment.
And what about the next sample?
The femoral blood.
And where is femoral blood from?
The femoral artery in the leg.
What other samples were collected?
Liver. Then we have two specimens that we refer to as, one specimen that we have as a long-term storage specimen. That is usually a blood sample. I'm not sure of the origin, but it's collected for being retained for a period of time, just in case the sample needs to be held for other testing.
Very good. And then what other samples arrived?
Then we have urine and vitreous humor, or ocular fluid.
All right. So going back to the top of page 1 here, what tests were run on these samples?
There were actually several different screens that were performed on the cavity fluid. We performed an acetaminophen screen and a salicylate screen.
What is the purpose of those screens?
Just to detect the presence of Tylenol and aspirin.
What about the femoral blood?
We did a volatile screen and confirmation.
And what was the result of that screening?
We found ethanol at a level of 0.131 grams per deciliter.
What is ethanol?
Ethanol is the alcohol that humans consume.
Is this what we would commonly see, for example, in any sort of blood test for a DUI case or
Yes.
something like that?
Yes.
What is the legal limit for ethanol in the blood under this section?
The legal limit would be a 0.08 gram percent per deciliter.
And this came back testing at 0.131, correct?
Yes.
Are you able to determine, based on your training and experience, approximately how many drinks that would be?
Not knowing the physical makeup of Mr. Russell, I would just approximate that would probably be maybe 3 to 4 beers worth alcohol drinks.
And just in general for blood, if you are testing the blood, what does a blood test give you in terms of your understanding of the contents of the blood and the levels of various drugs that may or may not be present?
I'm not sure I am.
Let me ask, is it fair to say that the blood analysis is basically a snapshot?
Yes.
All right. Are you able to determine, based on levels in the blood, the point in time previous to the test that whatever substances were found are ingested? Or does it depend?
It depends.
All right. Would you be able to opine as to the length of time that the alcohol had been in the blood prior to the collection of the sample?
Not knowing how much alcohol was consumed or the time frame of when the alcohol was consumed, we don't know how high this alcohol level was. Because we did the ocular fluid, which is further on down in the report, I can tell that the alcohol level is actually decreasing. It's on the elimination phase.
Right. I'm going to scroll down here to the...
It's, I believe, the last result.
So we're talking
Yeah.
about the vitreous humor analysis, correct?
That is correct.
Where is the vitreous humor located in the body?
The eye fluid.
And what is the purpose of conducting the eye fluid test as well as the femoral blood test as it relates to alcohol?
There are several reasons why you would test the eye fluid. If you have a case where a decomposed body, the ocular fluid will tell you whether or not the alcohol in another sample could be from decomposition. But in this particular case, since there's no evidence of decomposition whatsoever, the alcohol in the vitreous tells us that that Mr. Russell was actually decreasing in alcohol. The vitreous fluid is 0.134 grams per deciliter, which is slightly higher. It's a 0.003 gram per deciliter higher, so it's he was either at the plateau of the alcohol curve or he was actually eliminating alcohol.
And what is an alcohol curve?
When someone drinks alcohol, the body will absorb the alcohol, and that's when the curve starts. It's a plot of alcohol concentration versus time. And so as you go through time, the curve starts to increase because the body is absorbing alcohol. But almost immediately, you'll start getting elimination. The body will metabolize the alcohol and try to eliminate the alcohol. But the absorption is faster than the elimination. So the rate, or you get an increase in the blood alcohol concentration. At a certain point, when the absorption of alcohol and the elimination are equal, it'll plateau. It'll start to curve off, and then you start to get an elimination where the amount of alcohol metabolized and excreted from the body is greater than what is being absorbed.
And are you able to draw any conclusions about, like I said, about the time prior to this that Mr. Russell consumed his last drink?
No, I cannot.
All right. But you know it was going down and it was being metabolized, correct?
Correct.
Going back up to the femoral blood here. Moving on to, was cocaine something else you screened for?
Yes.
And what was that screening process?
There were actually 2 screens or multiple screens for cocaine. The first is slightly lower on the report where it says cocaine and then the abbreviation for metabolite and then ELISA, the ELISA screen.
Is this what I'm indicating to here on the screen? Okay.
Yes.
And that says positive, correct?
That says positive.
And what do you know from that?
That is a screen that tells us it is a test that will look for either cocaine or some of the metabolites. So, and it doesn't tell us how much, it just tells us that the cocaine is present.
And based on that positive screen, were additional screens done?
Yes.
And what were those?
We did a specific analysis for cocaine and metabolites as well as a basic drug screen, which would pick up cocaine as well as a very comprehensive list of other illicit drugs and prescription medications.
When cocaine is ingested, how and how long does it take for it to be metabolized by the body?
Well, it depends on the route of administration. But generally, it's very rapid. It will be introduced very rapidly, either through snorting or smoking or injecting, and then once it hits the liver, it will start to be metabolized.
And into what does cocaine become metabolized?
Well, we have some of the metabolites listed. It will break down or be metabolized into benzoylecgonine, ecgonine methyl ester, and since alcohol is present in the bloodstream in Mr. Russell's blood, a specific metabolite, cocaethylene, was also formed.
And that's a metabolite of cocaine and alcohol?
Yes, it is.
Together? And where is that formed?
In the liver.
Are you able to draw any conclusion? And you have levels here over in the right column, correct?
Yes.
And what is the level of the benzoylecgonine metabolite?
It is 119 nanograms per milliliter.
Are you able to draw any conclusions based on that with regard to the amount or recency with which that was ingested?
That's a fairly low amount. It's somewhat consistent with maybe a single dose. Again, not knowing a prior history, we can't tell how. This is a single snapshot, so we don't know if this level was extremely high and it came down over a long period of time. But typically, when we see, if you look at the cocaine levels along with the benzoylecgonine, you can kind of see that it looks like a single dose of cocaine.
And can you give an approximate time prior to the test that would have been ingested?
Since the parent cocaine is present and at a low level, I could say probably within maybe 2 to 4 hours.
And just so we're clear, at the time of death, the metabolization stops, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
There is some, for cocaine, it can break down or especially convert to benzoylecgonine by a chemical hydrolysis. But when the sample is collected, it is put into a tube with preservatives, which are supposed to inhibit any further enzymatic change in the sample. However, like any other preservative, they're only good for a period of time. And so we do everything in our power in collecting the sample to minimize any degradation in the sample.
So if time of death was at, say, approximately 11 o'clock the night before, and the autopsy was conducted in the morning, and the sample was taken sometime the following morning, would that be a sufficiently fresh sample, for want of a better term? for you to believe these results are accurate and accurately reflect the amount of drugs in the blood at the time of death?
Yes.
All right. Now, I think you called it an ELISA screen, is that correct?
ELISA.
ELISA? What does ELISA stand for?
Enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay.
And what is the purpose of the ELISA screen?
It is a lot of screens are immunoassay based, and what they do is they involve an antibody-antigen reaction, and they can detect or screen for a particular compound or class of compounds. They're very quick, fairly automated, and so that's why a lot of laboratories use them to screen to identify if there is a substance in a particular class of drug that they need to confirm.
So is it fair to say the ELISA
In this particular case, it did test positive.
All right. And was a follow-up test done with regard to that?
Yes.
And what was the result of that?
That is the result just above the amphetamine ELISA, that amine confirmation GC mass spec, and that was none detected.
And what does that tell you?
That tells me that that the amphetamine result could be a false positive result.
But nothing was detected on the further follow-up test,
That is
correct? And I believe we already discussed the cocaine metabolite ELISA screen. Did that complete the screens that were done on the femoral blood?
Well, as you can see, there's a whole host of them. There's the barbiturates, benzodiazepines, cannabinoids. All those that have the ELISA screen after the name of the drug, those are specific screens.
So negative for barbiturates, correct?
Right, correct.
Negative for benzodiazepines.
Yes.
Negative for cannabinoids, correct?
Yes.
So that's marijuana, correct?
Yes.
Negative for paracetamol.
Correct.
Muscle relaxant.
Yes.
Positive for cocaine. Negative for fentanyl.
Yes.
Negative for methamphetamine.
Yes.
Negative for oxycodone.
Yes.
Negative for phencyclidine.
Correct.
That's PCP.
That's PCP.
Negative for tricyclic antidepressants, correct?
Yes.
And what are tricyclic antidepressants?
That includes drugs like amitriptyline, nortriptyline, imipramine. They're an older class of antidepressant drugs.
Prescription drugs.
Prescription, yes.
Potential.
Yes.
Did you find, and negative for methadone, correct?
Yes. There may be one more on the next page. No, that is all.
Did you find any evidence of any prescription drugs in Mr. Russell?
No.
Is that something that would come up on your screens?
Yes.
Now, I believe you said you also tested the urine, is that correct?
Yes.
And that is here on the second page of the report, or I'm sorry, Dr. Wyman, or someone else tested the urine, but the urine was tested, correct?
Yes.
All right. And that's on the second page of the report here, correct?
Yes.
And what is the purpose of also testing the urine as well as the blood?
Sometimes the urine is tested first to act as a screen, like the ELISA, in the sense that it's fairly quick. It's a procedure that you can do very quickly, and then that will give you an indication as to what drugs you want to specifically look for in the blood.
And compared to, so I think we called the blood analysis, the blood is a snapshot. How is the urine different?
The urine can really only tell us, excuse me, can only really tell us a history that that a particular compound was ingested at some time. But that's why no levels are reported, because we can't really interpret those levels.
So you can say something is present or something is absent, but you can't draw conclusions about how much. Is
Yes.
that fair to say? All right. So what were the results of the urine analysis for cocaine metabolites?
The urine was positive for benzoylecgonine, for cocaethylene, for the parent drug cocaine, for the metabolite ecgonine methyl ester, and a metabolite anhydroecgonine methyl ester.
And that's this last one here, correct?
That is correct.
And did you find anhydroecgonine methyl ester in the blood?
No.
So this is something that's showing up only in the urine, correct?
Correct, yes.
What, are you able to draw any conclusions based on the presence in the urine of the anhydroecgonine methyl ester?
The conclusion that I would draw from this is that the cocaine had to have been smoked, like a smoked crack sample.
And what leads you to that conclusion?
Anhydroecgonine methyl ester is formed, it's called a pyrolysis product. It's formed from the actual burning or lighting cocaine on fire.
And does its presence in the urine and not the blood tell you anything?
Well, it could be that it could give an indication as to recency of use. The fact that it's not in the blood could say that anhydroecgonine methyl ester has a short half-life to where it would only be able to stay in the blood for a short period of time. So it could be that the ingestion of the cocaine was not immediately, but maybe a little bit recent, as in terms of maybe an hour or two.
And what about the basic drugs here? We again have cocaethylene, cocaine, and nicotine.
Yes.
That's similar to your findings with blood, correct?
Well, except for nicotine, it is unique to the urine.
And does that tell you anything in particular?
He just he had smoked a cigarette sometime in the past.
Doctor, are you familiar with the pharmacological effects of alcohol use?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the pharmacological effects of cocaine use?
Yes.
And are you familiar with any sort of interaction between those two?
Yes.
All right. What are the pharmacological effects of alcohol use?
Alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. So the effects from alcohol would be drowsiness, lethargy, inattentiveness, just somnolence, things, and getting drowsy and confused.
What about the effects of cocaine?
That is a central nervous system stimulant, so that would have almost an opposite effect. It would be someone who would be alert, attentive, maybe agitated or irritable, aggressive,
And
impulsive.
how did? Oh, pardon me. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead and finish. I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's it, impulsive.
Now, you're not able to say how it particularly affected Timothy Russell, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Generally, how do cocaine and alcohol interact when they're both present and being used by one person at the same time or in close proximity?
A lot of times people will do cocaine and alcohol together because the cocaethylene that is formed enhances the euphoric high of the cocaine.
Would it? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, it would enhance the cocaethylene is an active metabolite, and it is like equal potent as to cocaine. So it would enhance that high.
Would the combination of the depressant effect of alcohol and the stimulant effect of cocaine, does it basically cancel each other out, or how does that work?
Not necessarily. You may get some attentive enhancement, but cognitively there is usually not they do not negate each other. So many of the symptoms you might have deleterious effects that you would get from cocaine and a different set from alcohol.
So, if, for example, someone were driving with this amount of alcohol and this amount of cocaine in their system, are you able to opine as to what the likely physiological effects on the body would be?
Can you state that?
Yeah. Are you able? Do you have the? Are you able to form an opinion, given the levels of cocaine and alcohol in Mr. Russell's system, and your knowledge of the effects of those drugs? Are you able to form an opinion as to what effect, if any, that would have if he were, for example, driving?
I would say he was affected, but I can't say specifically for him what effects he would have.
Very good. And are you able to, other than within a couple of hours, you're not able to pin down a more recent or a more specific time of prior use?
No.
Correct? Just a moment here.
Sure.
Moving on to State's Exhibit 147 then. We're on to the toxicology report regarding Malissa Williams. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Were similar samples received from her?
Yes.
So, cavity fluid, correct?
Cavity fluid.
Femoral blood?
Yes. There was bile was different, and I think that was it. Bile was collected in this case.
What's the difference between a bile analysis and a liver analysis?
Well, bile. A lot of the opioid type drugs, a lot of compounds can reside in the bile for a period of an extended period of time. So, if you're looking, or if you have a question about a drug that was taken maybe several days earlier, you can look into the bile.
But no tests were performed. Pardon me. No tests were performed on the bile or the liver or on the long-term storage blood in this case. Correct?
That is correct.
All right. So with regard to the cavity fluid, again, Tylenol and aspirin were screened for, correct?
Yes.
And nothing was detected?
Yes.
Moving on then to the femoral blood, what screens were done on the femoral blood?
A volatile screen for the ethanol was performed, and that was none detected.
So no alcohol.
That is correct.
All right.
And acid neutral by gas chromatography mass spectrometry was for particular drugs that are acid neutral drugs.
Such as?
The barbiturates, the carisoprodol, some seizure medications will fall into that category.
What else?
Then there were no drugs from the acid neutral category. Then we have the ELISA series with the opiate ELISA, which was none detected.
That would be heroin or oxycodone?
Morphine, codeine.
And then the basic drug screen, correct?
Yes.
And what were the results of that?
The basic drug screen was positive for caffeine, cocaine at 0.19 milligram per liter, cotinine, which is a metabolite of nicotine, and ecgonine methyl ester, which is the metabolite of cocaine.
And the level of cocaine of 0.19 milligrams per liter, are you able to draw any conclusions based on that?
That is consistent with the higher end of a dose of like a 50 milligram dose of cocaine.
How does that compare to the dose, or the level rather, found in Mr. Russell?
This is higher.
Significantly so?
Well, the level on Mr. Russell was reported as less than 0.125. So I really don't know the level. We don't have a reported level, but I would say that it's yes.
And then the ecgonine methyl ester we also talked about with regard to Mr. Russell, cocaine metabolite, correct?
Correct.
All right. And then was there a separate cocaine metabolite testing done with the GCMS?
Yes.
And what were the results of that?
This analysis is specifically for cocaine and the metabolites, and the results were benzoylecgonine at greater than 800 nanograms per milliliter, cocaine at 233 nanograms per milliliter, ecgonine methyl ester was positive, and the anhydroecgonine methyl ester was positive.
Are you able to draw any conclusions based upon these results?
Yes.
And what are those?
The benzoylecgonine level is greater than 800 nanograms per mil, which is fairly significant. That indicates that typically we don't see these levels for a single use. The cocaine level here now is reported as 233, which is slightly higher than the basic drug screen. Again, that's still consistent with the high end of a single dose. So the half-life of cocaine is around 0.8 hours to maybe an hour and a half. The half-life for benzoylecgonine is more on the order of 6 hours. So what we're seeing here, or what I see here, is that we have an accumulation of several doses by the benzoylecgonine. That the level is high, and so you have what looks like a more recent use with the parent cocaine, and the high benzoylecgonine is an indication that there have been other doses.
And were you able to give us a general time frame?
The time frame is going to be fairly recent because the anhydroecgonine methyl ester is found in the blood. So I would put that at less than an hour.
Of the most recent dose, correct?
Yes.
What about the prior doses?
Again, it's kind of difficult to say because not knowing the dose size, or the frequency. Generally, a lot of cocaine users will do rapid succession of dosing.
And now this says greater only. Pardon me. The benzoylecgonine level is showing simply as greater than 800 nanograms per milliliter. Why is there not a more specific number there?
When the analysis is performed, it includes a calibration of the instrument. And to calibrate the instrument, there are several samples that have each one of these compounds spiked into a blood sample and run so that the instrument can be calibrated. And the highest calibrator is the 800 nanogram per mil. So the amount of benzoylecgonine in the case is higher than the highest calibrator.
And again, when cocaine is metabolized, is there a similar process as we discussed with the alcohol curve in terms of an increased level, a plateau, and then decreasing?
Yes.
Is that, in general, how drugs are metabolized for any drug?
Yes. A lot of times what you will get is an increase and then a steady state, and then it will. The half-lives are very important as to the amount or the elimination. With alcohol exhibits a type of elimination that's very predictable, and drugs don't.
So with Mr. Russell, with the alcohol, based on the vitreous fluid, you were able to tell he had been up and was coming back down. Are you able to reach a similar conclusion, one way or the other, with regard to the greater than 800 nanograms per milliliter in this sample?
No.
So you don't know whether she was on her way up or plateaued or on her way back down, correct?
That is correct. This is a snapshot of that one moment in time.
So in order to know, you would need to get another sample, a sample an hour earlier, a sample an hour later,
correct,
and compare those, correct? Moving on, what other tests were performed for drug screening?
As you can see, there were several ELISA screens. Most of them were none-detected except for the cannabinoids or marijuana. That was positive.
Now we have a positive for cannabinoids in the ELISA screen, but none detected with the GCMS. Is that significant?
That could indicate that, that there are many metabolites within the blood, and so it is possible that that the parent drug or the metabolites that were tested for were not screened or detected.
But again, negative for amphetamine, correct?
Yes.
Negative for barbiturates?
Yes.
Negative for benzodiazepines?
Yes.
And what are benzodiazepines?
That includes the sedatives of like Valium, temazepam, alprazolam, or Xanax, all of that class.
Negative for carisoprodol, correct?
Yes.
And negative for fentanyl, methamphetamine, oxycodone, and phencyclidine, correct?
That is correct.
Right.
There should be a methadone, and that may be, yes, there's the, yes, those two.
And then on the next page,
tricyclic antidepressants and the methadone.
and none of those either, correct?
Correct.
All right. Did you detect any prescription medication in her system?
No, we did not.
So no antipsychotics, anything like that, correct?
That is correct.
And is that something that your test would have revealed?
We pick up some antipsychotics and some, and a lot of other prescription medications, yes.
And nothing showed up, correct?
That is correct.
With regard to the urine, what was detected in the urine?
With the cocaine metabolite screen or confirmation, we went ahead and we detected benzoylecgonine, cocaine, ecgonine methyl ester, and anhydroecgonine methyl ester. They were all positive.
And once again, the anhydroecgonine methyl ester indicates that this was that the cocaine was consumed by smoking, correct?
Smoking crack.
Smoking
Yes.
crack. All right. What about the cannabinoids?
The cannabinoids was positive for delta-9, that's tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, and it was the carboxylic acid.
And what is the carboxylic acid of delta-9 THC?
It's an inactive metabolite of marijuana.
And are you able to draw any conclusions based on that?
Just that that Miss Williams had at one time ingested marijuana.
And then with regard to the basic drugs?
We found levamisole.
And what is levamisole?
That is a drug no longer prescribed in the United States, but it's been found very heavily in cocaine. It was as a cutting agent. Since the mid-2000s, many sources of cocaine were coming up positive. It's a cutting agent.
Go ahead.
Then we found cocaine, nicotine, which is the parent drug for cigarettes, and ecgonine methyl ester.
And once again, you weren't able to determine any levels in the urine, just the fact that these drugs were present in the urine, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And based upon the results of the tests on Malissa Williams, are you able to offer an opinion as to the most recent point of ingestion of cocaine?
Well, I would say with her, she had to have been very recent, less than an hour, since she still had the anhydroecgonine methyl ester in her bloodstream, and the parent cocaine was still at a significant level. So it kind of gives me the indication that it was a very recent ingestion.
Sure.
So, doctor, within those windows, which you said up to an hour for her and I think up to 6 hours for him, is that right?
Well, that's kind of going, that's at the extreme. It would
Okay.
be more like 4 hours,
All
I'd
right.
say.
But within that window, so with her, it could be 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour,
Yes.
and there's no way really to tell based on this, correct?
Correct.
And the same thing with him, it could be an hour ago, 4 hours ago, 5 hours ago.
Yes.
So within that window, it's hard, you can't narrow it down beyond that larger window, correct?
Again, yeah. Not knowing where or what level we're talking about, we don't know if this is coming down or going up, so that is correct.
Very good. Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Barnhill, do you have any cross-examination, Mr. Schwartz?
Just a little bit. Thanks, Judge.
You're welcome.
Morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
Let's start with Mr. Russell. Is that okay?
Yes.
Go in the same order that the prosecutor did. The first thing that you discussed was the blood alcohol content, correct?
Yes.
Okay. What we call BAC.
Yes.
And you indicated that Mr. Russell had a .131 BAC, if you will.
Yes.
Okay. And you indicated that the legal limit in the state of Ohio is .08, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So anything above .08, our legislature has found that you should not be operating a motor vehicle, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that's because of the effects that that level of alcohol has on your ability to safely operate that car, right?
Yes.
Okay. And at that level, staggering,
It can, depending on the individual.
slurred speech,
Again, it depends on the individual and their tolerance, but yes, yeah.
certainly affects your ability to perceive or understand the situations that you're in,
Correct.
your ability to react.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you indicated that you can't tell exactly how many drinks it takes somebody to get to a certain level unless you know a little bit more about them, right?
That is correct.
Their metabolism, their weight, what they've had to eat, things like that.
Yes.
But there are some commonly established principles regarding BAC, are there not?
Yes.
And I think generally we use about a 160-pound man, would that be fair?
Yes.
And we say that for each drink, that being either a shot of whiskey or a 12-ounce can of beer or a 4-ounce glass of wine, that those would be 1 unit dose.
Approximately, yeah.
And it would be fair to say that for the 160-pound man, for each dose that you take, you usually go to .02, correct?
Yes.
So if you're 100 pounds, you're going to go a little bit higher on that first drink, and if you're 220 pounds, you're going to be a little bit lower on that first drink.
Right.
But if you're 160 pounds, it's .02 per drink, right?
Roughly, yes.
And then we metabolize that alcohol in our system, correct?
Yes.
Would it be fair to say that we metabolize roughly .01 per hour?
That would be for more a naive person. A person who's a heavy drinker might be at .02.
Okay. But what you're saying then is that depending on your level of alcoholism or alcohol use, each hour you burn somewhere between half of that drink and the whole drink.
Yes.
Okay. So for a 160-pound man to get himself to .13 and change, you'd have to have at least 7 or 8 drinks, right?
It's possible, yes. Yeah.
You're going .02 for each one,
Right.
and that would be if you drank them all in rapid succession, because as you're drinking them, you're burning them.
You're
right?
burning them, correct.
So if the legal limit is .08, and I go out to the bar and I have 4 beers in the first hour, I'm still under the limit, right?
Say that again?
A 160-pound man goes to the bar, and he drinks 1 beer every 15 minutes for an hour. He's now had 4, correct?
Right.
.02 times 4 would be .08, right? And in that hour, he would have burned at least .01 to .02, right?
Correct.
So if a guy went out to the bar and drank 4 beers in the first hour, he would leave that bar somewhere between .06 and .07, right?
Again, it's a possibility, yes.
The rough principle.
It's a rough principle, yes.
Again, if that guy drinks all the time, it might be different. If it was first time drinking, it might be different.
Right.
If he had-
What he ate,
What he ate.
yes, because if he's an empty stomach, there's a lot of,
But you'd agree those are standard principles for the average 160-pound
Yes.
male. Okay. And we don't know how many drinks Mr. Russell had, correct?
that is correct.
But we know that using the principle of .02, do you know how much he weighed?
No, I do not.
Using the standard principle for .02, to get to .134, you need at least 7 or 8, correct?
Yes.
And we know he's coming down, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And we don't know how high he got, right?
Correct.
We don't-
Now, with the vitreous, he could have also been at the plateau because the value was very close to the blood. So we're talking he's either eliminating or he's right at the plateau.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's say he plateaued himself out somewhere around .13, right?
Right.
Okay. And you're not allowed to operate a motor vehicle anywhere beyond .08.
Correct.
So you'd have to drink more than .13 in order to plateau back down.
Yes.
Okay, so he's coming down and he may be plateauing somewhere at least from .09 to .10 to .11, .12 to .13, right? So he's significantly above the legal limit when he
Yes.
plateaus.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about the cocaine metabolites in his blood, correct?
Yes.
And are you aware that while the state of Ohio indicates a level in which you're no longer permitted to operate a motor vehicle while under the influence of alcohol, there are also levels where you're not permitted to drive under the influence of cocaine, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And while the alcohol level is .08 in Ohio, the cocaine level is anything above 50 nanograms per milliliter in your cocaine metabolites. Are you aware of that?
Is that in blood?
Blood.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So not only was he significantly above the legal driving limit for alcohol, he was also more than double the legal driving limit for cocaine metabolite in the system, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you then talked about an additional metabolite that is formed when you mix alcohol and cocaine, correct?
Correct.
And that's coca-ethylene, correct?
Yes.
And that has a number of effects on the body, correct?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And what that actually does is it has effects on the transmitters in the brain,
Yes.
and it increases our levels of dopamine, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so if you mix cocaine and alcohol, your dopamine level increases, correct?
Right.
And that has increased euphoria,
Right.
and studies have shown that that can lead to increased levels of violent and impulsive behavior.
Yes.
So often, as you said, folks mix their cocaine and their alcohol because it gives them an even greater sensation than either one individual.
Yes.
And they don't balance each other out such that you're sober again.
Correct.
Okay. So because the alcohol might bring you down and the cocaine might take you up, if I do enough alcohol, enough cocaine, I don't get back to ground zero and I'm okay.
That is correct.
In fact, their combination increases the levels of dopamine in the brain, and then we have increased euphoria, and studies have shown increased violent and impulsive behavior.
Objection.
Are you aware of that?
Overruled.
You agree with that?
It's yes.
Okay. And also, this coca-ethylene combination and metabolite actually increases the duration or high from the cocaine, correct?
Yes, it does.
So if I just take the cocaine, and you say usually that cocaine is going to give me a rush or a euphoria for 15 or 20 minutes, if I mix a couple of shots or beers in with that, that's going to extend my euphoria or behavior from the cocaine.
All this is based on the premise that these are signs and symptoms that Mr. Russell is exhibiting, which he could be, but not necessarily is he. But yes.
Generally, when you mix cocaine and alcohol, that's what happens.
Right. Right.
You can get drunk, you can get high, but when you put the two of them together, you get coke ethylene.
Correct.
and that increases the euphoria, right?
Yes.
It also greatly increases your heart rate, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And in fact, that combination alone can cause you to suffer a heart attack.
Yes.
Okay. And people have done that, right?
Yes.
Okay. The combination of cocaine and alcohol together are sufficient to cause a heart attack.
Correct.
So we know that Mr. Russell was significantly above the legal driving limit with alcohol, and we know that he was more than double the legal driving limit with cocaine, correct?
Yes.
Now, you indicated or tried to formulate a time frame when he had last ingested the cocaine, correct?
Yes.
If another expert had previously testified that it was in her opinion that he had ingested cocaine within minutes of his death, would you quarrel with that?
Objection.
Based on what? Not a fair paraphrase of the testimony?
Based on, I don't believe Dr. Weens was an expert in the pharmacological effects of cocaine.
Well, I think, though, that she was qualified to testify to the essentially the amount of time it had been in the system. I think she agreed she was, so it's based on her own saying she was, so overruled.
Very good, thank you.
Can you restate the question?
Sure. If another expert has previously testified that they believe that Mr. Russell had ingested cocaine within minutes of his death, would that be reasonable?
It falls within the hours that I said, but yes.
So when you say hours, it could have been a minute before he died, or it could have been 4 hours before he died?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And you can't say to any reasonable degree of scientific certainty which is which?
That is correct.
Fair enough. May we turn your attention to Miss Williams?
Yes.
No alcohol, correct?
Correct.
But she has much increased levels of cocaine than Mr. Russell, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And in fact, her cocaine metabolite, as you previously testified, was 233 nanograms per milliliter.
That's actually the parent. Cocaine is 233. The metabolite is greater than 800 nanograms per ml.
I apologize. Greater than 800.
Yes.
Okay, so if we went back to our driving while impaired standard of anything greater than 50, she's off the chart.
Correct.
Okay. No business ever being anywhere near or behind the wheel of a car.
Correct.
Objection.
Well, if you say near a car, well, if that's what you're objecting to, that is objectionable. But I think I knew what he meant, which was driving.
Okay. And that level, I guess you could go near the car, you could stand on it, you
Yes.
could sit on it, you could ride in it, but you certainly shouldn't be operating.
That is correct.
Okay. And there's a series of things that happen to the body when you're at that level of cocaine, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And euphoria.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What are other symptoms of having that level?
Well, irritability, like you had mentioned, increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, excitability, maybe aggressiveness, possible impulsive behavior. Again, these are all symptoms, but doesn't necessarily mean that that particular person is exhibiting all those symptoms.
Right.
Yeah.
But if your level was 0, we wouldn't even be talking about the possibility that
Yes.
you could be exhibiting all those symptoms.
Correct.
So, clearly, doctor, if we were here on operating a vehicle under the influence trial, we were here on an aggravated vehicular assault or vehicular homicide trial, and the defendant had either of the readings that Mr. Russell or Ms. Williams had, there'd be no defense with it.
Objection.
Based on?
Not relevant.
I think it's reasonable cross-exam, so overruled.
Right?
According to Ohio law, yes.
According to Ohio law and your findings, there'd be no defense, right?
Correct.
Sure.
Doctor, thank you very much for your time. No
Do you-
more questions, sir.
Do you, Ms. Barnhill, have any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Barnhill. Sir, appreciate you coming down here. Our court reporter is also named Schuler, by the way. But you're excused.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. We'll go off the record for a moment. About how long is the next witness? Longish or quick?
Dr. Field.
Well, why don't we start and we'll get through his qualifications and we'll probably take a break at 10:15. You step there and please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear you testify to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I will.
All right. Please have a seat there and speak in the microphone. Mr. Cameraman, did your colleague tell you that we're not going to show autopsy photos?
That's correct.
Okay. You okay? All right, so we are on the record, and thank you, Mr. Bell.
Thank you very much. Would you please state your name, spell your last name for the record?
Joseph Felo, F-E-L-O,
Where do you work, sir?
at the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office in Cleveland, Ohio.
For how long?
I've been with that office for 17 years and 10 months
In what capacity, sir?
as a forensic pathologist. And when it was the coroner's office, I was a deputy coroner. Now we're at medical examiner's office, and I'm a deputy medical examiner.
What is the difference between a coroner and a medical examiner?
Both of them are in charge of the medical legal death investigation system. A coroner is elected and a medical examiner is appointed.
And the elected elected coroner at the time that you were a deputy coroner, sir, who was that?
For the first portion of my career was Dr. Elizabeth Barrage, B-A-L-R-A-J. Dr. Frank Miller, common spelling, was for the last 4 years as a deputy coroner. Currently, the medical examiner is Dr. Thomas Gilson, G-I-L-S-O-N.
When it was a coroner's office, what was your title at that time?
I was a deputy coroner and forensic pathologist for Cuyahoga County.
Okay. And were you the chief deputy coroner?
I was the last chief deputy coroner for Dr. Barrage.
Okay. And when this change happened, did that occur with the new county government?
Yes.
And you were appointed then by Dr. Gilson, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And your educational experience, sir, can you tell us about that?
Certainly. I received my Bachelor of Science degree from St. Lawrence University in Canton, New York in 1988. I received my osteopathic medical degree from the University of Health Sciences in Kansas City, Missouri in 1992. Between 1992 and 1993, I completed an osteopathic internship at Wilson Memorial Hospital in Johnson City, New York.
What is osteopathic internship? What is that, sir?
My medical philosophy is a holistic philosophy, and so my degree is a doctor of osteopathy. At the time, it was encouraged for recent graduates of our colleges to do a one-year internship, which would encounter clinical medicine throughout the hospital. So I took care of emergency room patients, pediatric patients, obstetric patients, surgery patients, sick patients, and the different wards.
Okay.
That was for 1 year.
And that was at New York State, is that correct?
It was in New York State, yes.
And then, did you have a residency after that, sir?
Yes, I completed a anatomic pathology and clinical pathology residency at the Cleveland Clinic Foundation. That was between 1993 and 1997.
At Cleveland Clinic here in Cleveland?
In Cleveland, yes, Ohio.
And then after that, sir?
I completed a forensic pathology fellowship at the Cuyahoga County Coroner's Office, also here in Cleveland.
Okay. During that fellowship, did you have somebody that was your mentor or trainer?
Yes, I did.
Was there a director of the fellowship program at that time?
Yes.
And who was that?
The director was Dr. Elizabeth Barrage, who was the coroner, but most of my training was with Dr. Robert Challoner, Challener, who was the chief deputy coroner at the time.
Okay. And then he retired, is that correct?
Yes.
And now, sir, as part of your duties, do you have that same those same tasks and duties?
Yes, I'm the forensic pathology fellowship program director.
Okay. And did Dr. Weems work or under your tutelage then, sir?
Yes.
And where did you grow up?
I actually lived my first 3 years in California, but the vast majority of my upbringing was in upstate New York.
Okay. And you've been the deputy medical examiner now for how many years then?
Deputy medical examiner since 2011, so 4 years.
Okay. All together as a coroner, or deputy coroner, and deputy medical examiner, sir?
17 years and 10 months.
What Judge, this would be the end of qualifications. Besides, sir, you do hold a certificate from the state of Ohio.
I'm licensed by the state of Ohio to practice medicine, yes.
Okay. And do you belong to any organizations, pathology organizations?
Yes, I do.
And what is that, please?
I am a member of the National Association of Medical Examiners. I'm a fellow in that organization. I'm also on the board of directors for that organization. I'm also in the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, and I'm in the local Cleveland Society of Pathologists.
You've conducted autopsies? Sir?
Yes, I have.
About how many over the course of your career?
I've done 3,258.
Okay. Gunshot autopsies, sir?
Many.
And have you testified before as an expert in Cuyahoga County courts?
Yes.
Nothing further on that subject matter.
You said 2,358?
3,258.
Okay. I knew I was getting it wrong there. Right. Sir, at this point, we're going to take a break. You remain under oath and obligated to return to the stand at 25 after. I don't know how long your testimony is, but be aware of the possibility that you might have to come back after lunch. We'll probably break the lunch at about 1:45 till 12:00, so just FYI.
Fair enough, thank you.
But thank you. You may step down, and we're off the record. Let's say 25 after. Thank you.